Hello everyone, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are in the world right now. I know I say this every week, but I'm really excited about this week's seminar because it's an area I probably don't get the chance to talk about quite as much as I would like to. When I teach and coach people, usually the topics are on things like improvisation and composition or chords themselves and a lot of the theory. And this more specific topic of harmonizing pieces and reharmonizing them and changing them completely is one I would always like to talk about more because it's such a fun way for you to just fiddle around with the music, put your own stamp on it, regardless of your level, your ability. It's just a great way for you to explore popular songs in a different way. There are so many songs that we know of, right, that have just been played over and over and over again, and we're just a bit tired of hearing it the same way. And they're the sort of perfect songs that are a suspect for reharmonization. And to the average listener, they might not know what it is you're doing with the song, but they will feel something is different, and they'll go, "Oh, I like what you're doing with it," without knowing what it is, without knowing the mechanics. But they'll be more interested in what it is they're hearing. And so I've chosen a mixture of examples today. And I think before we start, I think what I just wanted to quickly do with some of you is just go over some of the chords because there will be some pretty fancy chords that we'll be covering today. And I say this all of the time. If you're unfamiliar with the difference between a major seventh and a dominant seventh and a minor seven chord, it's tough. And that's why I did a seminar on it. It's in the portal. It's in the student portal. It's on the three types of seventh chords: major sevens, minor sevens, and dominant sevens. You really need to know that. It just makes the possibilities easier to understand. But even if you're struggling a little bit with that still, there is still ways you can reharmonize pieces of music without having to refer to too much theory. In fact, I've tried to make the approach for everyone's understanding today as untheoretical as possible. And often when I reharmonize pieces, I use my ear as much as I can. But having said that, I am just going to show, just to start with, I am going to take you over a couple of chords. So let's say you've got an F major 7, or an F dominant 7, or an F minor 7. You can do one thing with these three chords that often when you're reharmonizing a piece, this is just something that often happens, particularly if you're taking a more jazz-like approach. You'll often want to flatten the fifth note. It just gives the music a completely different sound and feel. So if I have a F major 7, now if I flatten the fifth note, which is the C, and take that down a semitone, I get an F major 7 flattened 5. It's got a really nice sort of dreamy timbre to it. F major 7, F major 7, flattened 5. What about F7, the dominant 7, F, A, C and E flat, and then F7 flattened 5. Again, I just take the C down a semitone to a B. It's got quite a dissonant sound, the F7 flattened 5. And this one is lovely. F minor 7 and F minor 7 flattened 5. Again, you take the C down a semitone. This is also known as a half diminished chord, but for the sake of this, we're just going to call it F minor 7 flattened 5. A really dreamy sound to it. G major 7, G major 7 flattened 5, which has G, B, C sharp, F sharp. I took the D down a semitone, I flattened the fifth. G7, G, B, D, F, G7 flattened 5, G, B, C sharp, F, and G minor 7, and G minor 7 flattened 5, the D turning into a D flat, G, B flat, D flat, F. For the sake of better notation here, it's called a D flat rather than a C sharp, as it is here. Here's a few chords that we haven't spoken about in our seminars in too much detail. Just thought I'd just quickly go over, just in case we see them a few times today. They just might show up. C7 with a flattened ninth. So I put the seventh in the left hand, C and B flat, and in the right hand, I've got a C sharp, E, and a G. That C sharp is the flattened ninth. Now the reason why that's significant is you've got a C in the bass and a C sharp in the right hand. So imagine a scenario in a song where you've decided to reharmonize the bass a semitone lower than the melody for that really dissonant sound. You would think that's impossible to reharmonize. Well, it isn't if you use this chord. And another really nice chord is a C7 sharpened ninth. I love this chord because you get this false relation between major and minor. So you've got an E, which is the major interval in a C7 chord, and then the minor interval is an E flat. It happens to be, in this case, the sharpened ninth, because the ninth would normally be a D. The seventh is the B flat, which sort of glues those two sounds together. And I put the seventh in the left hand, C and B flat. I've got C, B flat, E, B flat, E flat. I love that chord. So, we might even end up running into all sorts of weird and wonderful chords today as we go through this journey of reharmonizing songs. So let's get straight to it. The first song I thought I'd choose today, I wanted to choose a song I was a bit sick of. And a song that I've heard like a million times before, I've played many times before for gigs or whatever, is Fly Me to the Moon. And I mean, it's a great song, don't get me wrong, but it's sort of like, we've heard it quite a few times, right? And there's a lot of music out there, so... And so I'm going to play two versions of it. I've done a reharmonization of this. This is a perfect suspect for reharmonization because it's a song we've heard so many times before. It's got a really catchy melody, so you can get very experimental with the chords you use, and everyone's still going to recognize the song. So you could start using some really wild chord changes, and it's everyone still knows what it is you're playing. So great. So it's a perfect choice, I think, for reharmonization in that sense. So I'm going to play. This is the normal version with the sort of standard chords, you know, moving up in fourths. And let me just quickly play it for you. Etc., etc. So, how do I start to reharmonize a song like Fly Me to the Moon? So here it is again. So in red are the reharmonizations. These are the chords that are not in the original piece. And so how did I go about this process? I kept it as simple as possible, and the music is not that simple. I've put some rather wild chords in here. But the process I've used is very simple. So the second bar of the piece, the melody is an F. Fly me to the moon. We start on an A minor 7. I've decided to keep the A minor 7 the same because it's the start. I don't want to, just in this case, I don't want to sort of disorientate the listener. So I'm going to start on the tonic of the piece, the beginning of the piece, the A minor 7. So the second bar has an F. And this is where... And you could get your pen and paper out. You can get your fingers on your keyboard right now. You can choose any chord you want that has an F in it. Any chord you want that has an F in it. So the original goes to a D minor or a D minor 7, something like that. I've chosen a D flat major 7. So the F in a D flat major 7 is the major third interval, a D flat major chord. The middle note of a D flat major chord is an F. D flat major has very little to do with the key of A minor, which makes it even more exciting. And then I've chosen to, and this is a good little formula to follow. Every second chord or thereabouts, you can reharmonize. I've mixed it around a bit more in this arrangement I've made of it. But then I go back to the standard G7, and then I change the fourth chord. I've done something a little fancy here. We've got an E in the melody, and a B flat major 7, flattened 5. That flattened 5 is an E. Now, again, if you're not sort of so hot on these chords, remembering what is in a B flat major flattened 5, you could even take another approach. Just choose a random chord and let the melody create the dissonance, right? So a B flat major chord, the melody's got an E in it, and that E happens to be the flattened 5th. Eureka, you've made a dissonance without even knowing you've done it, sort of. So you can actually be treat chords, and this connects to the seminar we did a few weeks ago on composing your own music. Remember how I said to you, just randomly put chords together and use your ear and see what happens, and let your ear be the best guide, because reharmonization is a form of composing. It's just that you're composing something on someone else's melody. And that's the real fun bit of it. So this really helps your composition skills because you've got a template to work with. So I'm going to play these first 4 bars. Let me play the original again so you can compare it. The original. And the reharmonized version. So that last chord keeps it up in the air a bit. Let me keep going. I'll show you what I've done here.
Sorry, Tom, can I just interrupt you quickly? There's a couple of people just waiting to get in.
Latecomers. Oh.
Sorry.
No problems. Okay, just guys, I'm just going to stop for a moment while I let some latecomers in. Fantastic. Okay, righto. If you're just joining us now, we've already covered some really interesting things on this topic of reharmonization. I'm just going to give me a second. Okay, yeah. And while I'm just letting some of the latecomers in right now, I'm just going to talk a little bit about just answering a couple of questions. Why is the flattened ninth written as a C sharp instead of a D flat? Good question. I'll double check that. Yeah, I mean, you could probably put it both ways. I decided to put it as a C sharp, I think. Yeah, I mean, I probably should have written it as a D flat, but you could actually write it both ways. It's when it comes to the issue of harmonic spelling, it really depends on the context of what's happening next in the music. But seeing that there's not much happening after that, it was just a demonstration of one chord. You could write it out both ways. But yeah, in the context of calling it a flattened ninth, yes, you could call it a D flat or a C sharp. But in the flattened ninth, where we're going to call it a flat, if you go from a D to a D flat, so that definitely makes sense to put it that way. The most important thing you're looking out for is the color of the sound that you're changing. So for those of you who have just joined us, I'm just going to step back a little bit to let you know what we've covered so far. I've just played Fly Me to the Moon with the standard chords, and I've just reharmonized Fly Me to the Moon by changing the chords completely. And the way I've done that is I've looked for chords that don't have much to do with the key of A minor, but they have more to do with common notes that are in the melody. So an F, there's a whole ton of chords that can host an F, such as a D flat major. And I've sort of tried to follow a formula where I've changed approximately half of the chords of the song, just because I think Fly Me to the Moon is played so many times that I think it's just a good little formula for this particular song. And the real benefit of reharmonizing a song that is very famous like this is everyone's still going to recognize it. So let me play the original version, and then I'm going to play the reharmonized version. version. And you could see it takes the song on a completely different journey. I was really just looking for chords I liked the sound of. I was not following any particular theoretical template, other than, well, how many chords do I want to reharmonize? Now, you could go much further and reharmonize every single chord, and there are some artists that do that. I still wanted to keep some sort of reference to the original tune, so I kept things like the chord 1 and the chord 5. I quite liked this digression into the G minor 9 here. Having a G minor feel just sort of felt like a key change, but I was just really keeping that original melody because a D is in a G minor chord. And then, of course, here with an E flat major 7, there's a G in the melody, and that middle note of an E flat major is a G. So you get these really nice cross relations between chords. And so I would invite everyone right now, if we go back to that original version of Fly Me to the Moon that we looked at here earlier today, I would invite everyone just to play through the first 4 bars of the song and just choose 1 or 2. It's entirely up to you how many you choose. Choose 1 or 2 chords that you wish to reharmonize. And you reharmonize at the point of the chord change. So there's a B here. So if you wanted to change the G7, find another chord that has a B in it. And even if you need to be a little bit more academic about it, you can sit down and write out all the chords you can think of that have a B in it. And you might end up writing out 4 or 5 or 6 options, which you can then just experiment with. So, I mean, another chord that has a B in it is a C. It would be a C sharp dominant 7 chord. That has a B in it. So that I could test that. That sounded quite cool. So the B was acting as the 7th. But just choose. Would anyone like to volunteer a reharmonization?
I can have a crack if you want.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh.
Great. So that third chord sounded like a B minor.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was like a B minor or B minor 7. And so there you were using the B as the tonic note of the chord you were looking for. And yeah, that's a good choice. You also have other choices like B7 if you wanted to. That could sound quite nice. But that's exactly the premise that we're using here. Just look for other chords that have that host note in the melody. And you have a whole wide range of colourful options available to you that you can use. Does that concept make sense to everyone? Can everyone see the logic behind it? Or are there any questions that anyone has? I'm going to move on to the next example here.